Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. It's 2:30 and we're going to get started so that we're not late getting back to the main room for the final event of the day. Um, Thanks so much for joining our CSI panel. We are recording this session, so you can turn your camera off if you don't want to be included. And we do hope to share these videos after the conference ends. I'm going to turn it over to you.
You're muted, Veronica.
I'm muted. That's great. That's a good way to start, right?
That's okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Durando. I am the Interim Director for the Center for Advising and Academic Success, our centralized advisement office, and Veronica DiMeglio, my teammate. She is the Curriculum Coordinator at the College of Staten Island. Among many hats that she wears, she's also project manager with me, co-manager of the EDUCares team, in which we're going to explain more about today. I want to thank you for choosing us as your 2:30 session. There were some good choices, so we hope that you enjoy what we like to share with you. All right, V.
So in early March, while reports of the coronavirus spread throughout other parts of the world and countries were in lockdown mode, New York City was still bustling. We lived without masks. We boarded subways and trains and public transportation with no care in the world, without social distancing and without hand sanitizer. All along, this silent killer was lurking and encroaching on our ability to move freely. When Governor Cuomo announced the state of emergency, it prompted a domino effect of closures. It went from public schools to businesses to town to cities, and yes, even CUNY. The chancellor followed, indicating that as of March 19th, all non-essential employees would begin distance working, which has remained for a year plus a month. And just to follow with that, we started this journey that we're still actually living today, well before March 19th, earlier on when there were hints that we were closing.
So a week before we were informed that we were going to be fully telecommuting campus, our associate provost was visiting me in our office, and I said we were already starting to get tons of emails from students who are questioning whether or not we're going to close, and we need to do something about it. And so in a matter of 5 minutes, we thought of a system that we could create, a unit we could create that could, number one, just start addressing all of the questions that they needed answers to, and to bridge students to their faculty, to our campus. And we created EDUCares. EDUCares is a unit under the Center for Advising, and it is an academic student success care unit under our associate provost for undergraduate studies and student success. And our goal was simply to connect students to faculty and faculty to the students, and then students to the resources that they needed. It was challenging.
So the state of emergency set our campus into motion, and we need to start to prepare for remote learning and remote services. The disruption of the on again, off again gave us time to think and react about how we could do business as usual. We had some critics. People balked at the idea of or the notion of how can we be usual when we weren't on campus. And this was something entirely new for us. Many people grappled with this transition, myself included. From students and faculty, they were especially hit hard. A large number of students had gone absent or missing in the remote environment, and they were non-responsive to emails. We were concerned. We even had our Cove students, who were our students that in our student housing, they were actually abruptly relocated to Queens College because CSI was being considered as a temporary lodging facility for those working in the hospitals and on the front lines by the Army Corps of Engineers. So there was lots of stuff that was happening. The Office of Information Technology and Operations Services on our campus was also trying to coordinate the pickup or distribution of technology that was so needed by many. And again, that included students, faculty, and staff. With that, it was as though every hour we were tackling yet another issue that presented. We were tackling.
So we were trying to figure out what we needed to do. And what we needed to do was first take stock. So what could we do with what we have where we were? And so where were we? We were in a state of transition. What did we have? We had hundreds of students and faculty who couldn't connect with one another, living lives afraid of what was going on outside of the college, still trying to remain connected. And we had to find a way to reconnect our faculty with the students, to give the students a sense of security when everything felt so insecure and so fragile. So the EDUCares team was truly a team of two. It was Veronica and I for the first week, because we needed to build a real team behind us to take this workload. We had hundreds of emails from students trying to figure out what to do, who was doing their classes on a phone, who was without a computer, sharing computers with their family, with their parents, with their siblings, with their own children. We didn't know how great this was until we started to answer those first couple of emails. And what we knew was that we needed more and we needed more help, but we couldn't let them down.
So we started focusing on what were the real goals here of the EDUCares. We wanted to be able to provide support and resources to those that were in most need. We wanted to re-engage those students who basically went absent since the recalibration period. And we also wanted to make sure that everybody persisted, and that included, again, faculty and staff through the end of the semester. But I'm sure you all can attest, it was almost a day-by-day thing. With every turn or with every event or with every news report that you actually would see, we had to take stock. So we had to figure out what we were doing on our campus, what systems we had that can actually help support giving out resources or providing resources to those that needed, and what we were going to do to actually get those students to respond to our emails or even any communication for that matter. So we looked at the current system that we did have, and you saw it on the previous slide. We started to use Navigate CSI in the fall of 2019. We were fairly new to the system, but there were certain functionality pieces that we had yet to tap into. Initially, we started using it as an advising appointment system, but it turned out to be so much more. So our first priority was to reach out to those hundreds of students and faculty on campus, and we wanted to connect them. So here we were. We were faced with basically connecting and started to use text messages. And text messages is something that's a feature in Navigate. And we actually were surprisingly successful. So we did what we could with what we had for those we reached.
So one of the faculty members on our campus called Veronica and I the first responders. Veronica and I like to go by the term Laverne and Shirley better, but what we found while we were building a team was that there were staff members across the campus who traditionally worked in offices and their work could only be in the office. And so we found staff members whose job couldn't transition into the virtual world. And so we brought them into and under the EDUCares team, and they needed training. And in the meantime, we were texting students. So what we did is we sent a blast to all faculty members, asking them to identify any student who was at risk, who was not engaged in the classroom, who had technology needs, who had just disengaged, needed tutoring. We were flooded. And you can see we sent thousands of text messages and emails, and we started to reconnect the students to their classrooms and to the resources they needed while we built our team behind us. It was a learning process.
Oh boy, it was.
You're good.
It still is. Every day is a learning process. So we had an initial workflow that we created around, I guess you could say, the concept. Jen had just introduced that we sent out this broadcast message. And while it was a party of two, we thought it was manageable at first, but a lot of the outreach that we did unearthed so many other issues that we needed to develop solutions for. So heavy on the part of technology, the first focus for EDUCares was not only connecting the students with the faculty and the faculty with students, but we needed to get that technology to those students that did not have anything in their home, or those that were actually sharing a computer with another member of their family. So we took to text messaging. And then I started to cold call. I actually sat here at my kitchen table, and I think I went down a list of 150. And at first I used Google Voice, and then I got annoyed with it. So I just turned to my cell phone. So probably half of the CSI students have my number. They can call me whenever they want.
And
Not a
some
proud
still do.
moment, not a proud moment. But I do have to say that the whole experience of just going through developing a process, it kept me connected. I myself went through an issue. I had a family member, my husband, contracted COVID in early March. So I actually had to quarantine by myself, and I didn't tell anybody for a couple of weeks, not even Jen. And I'm going to tell you that I needed the students more than the students needed me. So again, it was a defining moment. But I will say that I've learned so much more. Students were surprised by, I guess you could say, the cold call. Some of them responded like, this is CSI, like you guys really care. I mean, taken aback at first, but I can get where they were coming from, but they were answering the phone. They were responding to the text messages. And when we sent that first initial blast of text messages, Jen and I chose to do it at night because we figured we'd get actually a greater return. And little did we, we did. And little did we know that once we set that text message out, the responses kept coming, that it actually kept us tied to our computer for 2 and 3 hours at a time. Because if the student was responding, we wanted to respond back to them. And again, so many other things had evolved from there.
So our first text message was pretty simple. We asked if they needed help, and it was a simple respond yes or no. And so we're checking in to see if you need any assistance with online learning. Please respond yes or no. And we had no, I'm fine getting a computer, I'm connecting now. But we did in fact connect students and give them Wi-Fi and get them devices. But then that unearthed other things that we were not necessarily mindful of: housing issues, hunger issues. So the other aspect of this was very, very life-changing in a sense. I am a CUNY girl through and through, been with CUNY since 1997 as a student and then worked my way up. I was almost disconnected from the needs of our students during COVID. It's not that I forgot what we need or where we come from. My focus was keeping them in the classroom and keeping them engaged, but I forgot that there was this other side of our student body that needed to be addressed. We worked with our CARES unit. Our CARES unit deals with real issues. And if we couldn't connect to a student that a faculty member was concerned about, we did move it to the CARES unit. And twice out of thousands, twice we had to actually have a domestic follow-up. We were not so mindful initially when we created our workflow because we forgot that these things were underliers in their success or inhibitors of their success. These moments, these initial moments, literally have changed Veronica and I for the better. I connected with a student who I will never forget, who had just buried her 2-year-old daughter who died from COVID. And no one had spoken to her but me, because no one knew that she was going through this. And I reconnected her to our campus, connected her to counseling, connected her to the resources she needed. was that bridge between her and her faculty members to give her some time for grief and to assess her own life and get reconnected. She didn't wish to drop. She wanted to continue. She needed something. But we learned so much about our student body during this pandemic that EDUCares has a real purpose. And initially it was birthed out of this emergent state, but it has legs, and it's exactly what every campus needs, a true bridge between faculty and student resources. And it is truly one of the proudest moments of my life in creating this.
And I'm just going to add one other thing. When they didn't respond to a text or even a phone call, we actually did get in our car and deliver devices to local students. I mean, again, not
We
probably
were masked.
Not an approved moment for
not an
CUNY,
administratively approved function, but we did it.
but we did it. Yeah. But at this point, we realized we needed to grow our team. So what we did was we went out and we recruited. And Jen was basically the brainchild on this. So we realized that a team of 2 would not reach all the students that were in need. So we developed phases. We developed a team leader. We figured the best way was to ask for volunteers. And lo and behold, there were many that actually were interested in being part of something. Because as Jen indicated earlier, a lot of them their responsibilities were in person. So this was their way to reconnect, re-engage, actually feel, tied to the college, because not only students, but faculty and staff were dealing with isolation issues.
Yes.
So
we adopted the entire testing office since they could no longer do testing in person. We had representatives from across the campus in every division. We actually had half of the humanities and social sciences dean's office working with the EDUCares team, because this was important to our dean, and she wanted her staff members to be able to hear what was going on and to be able to be resources for the students as well. But our workflow ended up working.
It did. It did. And one thing I do have to say that, I'm a 14-year veteran at CSI, and I thought I pretty much, had a handle on what was going on campus, but there were so many more things that I had not had, I guess the exposure to, and this is actually where it came about. The training aspect, and I will say those first couple of days, I don't know if you all can relate. I never really was a Zoom person, or I think we were using CUNY WebEx at first. I can't remember because it's all a blur. But we grappled with learning how to use that, how to actually chat, how to sign in, issues with Blackboard, so on and so forth. And I could just remember our first training with our testing group, and a lot of those folks they weren't heavy CUNY first users. No. And we brought in Navigate, and the fact of we were just doing everything over the internet was incredible. I mean, filling out forms, people didn't have PDF, Adobe Writer. They were printing things, we were scanning things back and forth. And it almost got me that first training session, because I was like, I don't think that we were going to be able to do it, but we did it. And here we are, and they're like experts now. So
they are our experts now.
Yeah. Oh. So we revised our EDUCares workflow. We worked out some of the kinks. And again, it was day by day, week by week. And we actually overlaid it onto our progress report. So using Navigate again, we actually were submitting progress reports through the system, and that basically is soliciting faculty feedback on how students were performing in their class, and if students were at risk, and basically identifying those areas of risk and how they can actually troubleshoot and perhaps remedy. So what we did was we sent out our faculty feedback reports in, I believe it was April 9th through the 27th. We actually left a wide window open. There were students that we had yet to reach. And again, if you can imagine, there were still students without technology, and the technology distribution had changed. It went from central to local, and that was an adjustment period. But we actually got a handle of it. Our faculty were pretty responsive. Of the 1,000 or so that were sent out, we did have over 400 that responded and identified those students. So it was a 40% return rate, which was actually good. It was probably the best that we had with the system thus far. The faculty did assign alerts. The alerts included participation attendance concern. There was a tech alert. There was a missing or late assignments. And then of course, we actually kept that students that were non-responsive to emails or any type of outreach, or they were just absent from the classroom. So what we did with those alerts is we actually developed automated response messages. And again, this was all through the Navigate system. And those automated responses actually provided students with additional information on how they could probably troubleshoot what the faculty member was reporting about their performance. We also used the case management system, and I'll show you in the next slide, of how we identified those students that were still non-responsive. They were assigned directly to our EDUCares staff. And those staff members started outreach again. And that consisted of phase 1, 2, and 3. So they started to text them again, or text them the first time, because some of them were actually probably new in our fields, because the only ones we were contacting in the beginning were the ones that the faculty had reported. Yes. Phase 2 went on to telephone. And again, that was a different set of staff members that took on that level of contact, because they were a little bit more versed with, I guess you say, advisement issues and perhaps handling how they would intervene. What steps should I take next? If I'm not doing well in my class, should I withdraw? And the third was emails. And the phase 3 email was basically closing the loop or closing the gap. And that was actually, it came back to the team leader and Jen and myself, because what we did was we just basically summed up, we tried to reach you. We understand that you might be, experiencing these issues, and these are the resources that we are going to provide for you. And if you need additional assistance, let us know. Just to give you an idea, in the beginning, Navigate actually pulled in the preferred email in CUNY first. And I will tell you that that actually served up the purpose, because our students were actually more responsive to their preferred email than their campus email.
Yes.
So I would have to say that at that point, this worked perfectly. So this is just a screenshot of our progress report campaign. Again, a piece of Navigate that we overlaid with EDUCares. It was soliciting feedback to the faculty, and they identified those students who were at risk. This was sort of, well, this is our progress report workflow, just how actually the progress report originates, what happens when a specific alert is assigned, the notification that is actually sent automatically to the student. Right now it's delivered to the campus email, the care unit that's actually handling those alerts. And we still to this day have actually a case management system for some of our alerts. Specifically, one that we've actually pushed along is students have issues with accessing their campus email and their Slack accounts. And these are specific to CSI. I'm sure you have them at your institutions, but students constantly forget their password or they go inactive and they just plain can't get in. So we have this alert attached to our help desk. And what they do is they actually triage and help the student walk through the issues that they face in order to get into their campus email. And as you know, a lot of our official communications are going there. Ideal interventions, basically that's what we came up with. We were contacting the student and outlining those automated messages. And in some cases, other units such as tutoring or academic support services were using the students identified to do additional outreach to actually get them to come to tutoring and perhaps make a appointment. Later on in the cycle, and we used EDUCares for this, we actually promoted the CUNY flexible grading policy. And as you know, with all the academic continuity guidance that came through, there were messages every week that changed. The withdrawal date was pushed to the last day of class. And, you know, that changed the whole nature of the game. And I'm just going to tell you, we're in our second progress report for this semester. And we've now incorporated our last alert, which is a mid-semester grade of D or lower. And this came out of what had happened during spring of 20 and then even fall of 20 as well. Because we noticed that students were not persisting and they were still struggling, even though we provided all these resources. And perhaps the best advice that we can give to a student, I'm not saying that it's something that we're proud of, but if they are failing a class, we'd much rather them take that W than end up with a failing grade and perhaps, you know, tank their GPA. So this was just the faculty feedback. And again, it was just on alert. So recommend tutoring was actually one of our largest. Participation attendance.
Yeah, we were pleased to see the technology need had decreased because within the first couple of weeks, there were hundreds of devices that were distributed. And so these 54 students were not in our initial run, or they had a computer that had broken at that point. So we were quite pleased with this number because Veronica, it was like 700 devices. I don't remember what the number was, but those devices were distributed early on. And so we were able to keep those students engaged in the classroom. Immediately when we received the 54, we connected them right away to a device because so much time had already passed in the semester. When I can tell you what we learned most about the faculty feedback was the faculty was as concerned about these students as we were. They were connecting with the EDUCares team and saying, I'll give another extension. I'm not going to have a deadline. I'm going to do my best to keep the student engaged. And so if a student entered or re-entered the classroom weeks after the recalibration, the faculty were so flexible in trying to keep the student engaged in the classroom. Many were accommodating of late assignments, extensions, and I know that we had a large number of incompletes given out of that compassionate grading that we all had promoted. Go to the next slide. This is our management system, which we're really proud of.
So, I mean, I don't know where your institution is in, I guess you could say, the implementation of Navigate, but this is something that is one of the features. And again, it's a case management system, and it worked perfectly because it was a workflow behind the scenes that we did not think we had when we started this whole concept of EDUCares. And it just folded nicely. I mean, we assign cases, and I mean, this is just a nice, pretty slide that I had to share over and over again. But what the key point with Navigate, and actually even with EDUCares, was that we were documenting every attempt to contact a student and every person that did touch a student. So we do have records, and, you know, it's something to go by. And hopefully in future semesters, we can actually use those students who are identified here to see whether or not they persisted. And perhaps we can actually point to this point of, or this semester, which is what there was defined, you know, what defined them or what made them push through. So again, you folks all should have this. I'm not sure yet as to where you are, but this is something that we are currently using present day for some of our alerts that we are continuously assigning to students as, you know, at risk or having some type of issue.
Okay, so these are some high level workflow details. You can see on the right-hand side, we had initially were trying to reconnect, but these were the issues that came up when we began our outreach. So childcare concerns, or those who needed textbooks and no longer had access to the library, and how do we connect them to those resources? It seems as though so many of us had Blackboard issues that were remedied, but still students continued to struggle with that. We had food insecurity and those who needed emergency funding or housing. We connected students to counseling. We also had a large number of our student cohort who were considered essential workers. When a student identified as an essential worker, and we know in the beginning that wasn't just your fire department, nursing, That was also your grocery workers or those in retail that could give us food while we were all running and trying to find toilet paper and those essentials, hand sanitizer. We had a large number of our student body who were considered essential workers and had to go in to work and had office work hours changed. And the EDUCares team would speak to their faculty members on behalf of the student to get more accommodations made. And I have to tell you, proud moment, there wasn't one who was inflexible. They were all very accommodating to our student body as they understood where they were coming from and the needs of our students.
Yeah.
So from March through June, we sent nearly 67,000 text messages to our students. We were able to reconnect students back in the classroom. And the first couple of weeks, we reconnected about 2,500 students to their faculty members. Students don't often know the names of their faculty members. Those were the early emails. Who's my professor? How do I email them? But when we would respond to a student in that manner, we CC'd the faculty member. So we were the bridge. We made those connections. The emails, we didn't need to send as many because they were quite responsive in text messages. And some would say, no, I'm fine, or yes, I need this. And our team would then kick it to the next person or where it needed to go. Our communication efforts were, I don't think this will ever be matched, but this is the highest that we've ever seen in the Navigate system.
Right. And just so you folks know, in Navigate, actually, you can see who's sending messages. Again, there's a dashboard, and that's where we pulled this from. So I pride myself on being one of the top 10 message senders. I've been actually bumped out of the top slot. Apparently tutoring is overtaking my role. But yeah, this is just, I mean, you could see the peaks, and there were certain points as to when we were, or what was happening, or what was going on. Like that 13th week, that was when we were trying to reach those students if they had tech issues. And then if you look in the 23rd and the 24th, where it peaks again, we were actually doing outreach to students with regard to that flexible grading policy and perhaps the withdrawal deadline being pushed. So it's not a bad way to keep track. What we've learned from this through EDUCares is that we are developing, or in the process of developing, a communication policy as it relates to Navigate. Now, we have a communication policy on campus, which is a broadcast, but we just want to limit the number of messages that go out, because as you know, or maybe not, we have quite a few messages that go out all the time to students. I apologize. That's a student that actually has my telephone number, folks. I'm going to claim him on my taxes. But yeah, so what I'm trying to say is we're very careful with the messages that we're sending. Earlier on, and I probably should have talked about this a little bit more, the messages that we crafted were ones that would prompt response and engagement. And that's what we've learned, because the text messages only allow for 160 characters. So we had to be very creative in what we wanted to say in 160, characters or less. So never knew that was at all possible, but it is.
So this is our flexible grading policy. So when CUNY came down kind of late in the game in spring semester, saying that they were going to adopt the credit no credit policy for the campus, we went into action. The EDUCares team went into action. So the students had a lovely window. They had a window in which they can claim, once the grade was posted, they can claim and opt into the credit no credit. As soon as those grades started to come in, we pulled daily reports of students who had F grades, and we were doing outreach immediately. And out of the 1,600 students who had earned an F, we got 1,244 of them to convert it to no credit. to assist with their persistence, so that we can keep them and move them along and have them engaged on campus. We were concerned that the impact COVID would have on their academic successes was foremost in all of our minds. We were concerned that there would be a large number of students who were at risk of becoming on probation. And thankfully, you know, we didn't dismiss after that spring. And it is something for which we are grateful. We are continuing this practice, not for the flexible grading policy, but students who are at risk of receiving a WU. So we're conducting outreach to those students who are at risk of failing or the WU to speak about the grading policy and what it means and how it can impact financial aid, and what they should do in their best interests. So, okay. Okay, so.
Yeah, so this is where we were. I mean, I'm sure you folks were. I mean, everyone in my college knows that I sit in front of my dish drain. So they know when I do my dishes and when I don't. So as we sat all in our desks, whether it was in the kitchen or in our bedroom or in your office at home, we pulled up our bootstraps and we did what we could with what we had from where we were. And our associate provost, he actually prides, he makes me feel prideful of the fact that we have the ability to create things with little or no resources. And I have to tell you that this is just what it was. It was an idea that Jen pushed, and it came to light. So, you know, you need to take stock. You need to know what's on campus. You need to know the needs of your students. You need to identify those. Perhaps you could survey them. Perhaps you could just ask the ones that you know that are closest to you. Listen to them. You'll learn something about them. You need to develop a communication plan. We're constantly redefining a communication plan here at CSI. We'll get there when we, you know, but it's a constant work in progress. You know, every day is a new day. We're so busy putting out fires that sometimes we don't think we're getting to the end, but that's all part of the process.
Next slide. Let's show them the next
slide. Okay,
yes.
Sorry.
So you can do this, right? So you can build your own bridge for student success. And we would encourage you to take stock of student need. Now, if you want to build this on a small scale, you can start with your students who are at risk, right? Those who are on probation, or those who are at risk within a program. So what you're going to do is take stock of what your students need and how you can work with them with what you have. We didn't need to go out and buy any software. I mean, if you have Rave, you can text them. If you need to use Retain or whatever software you have to rethink that software and how you can use it to serve your student body and ultimately your goals. And so take stock of the student needs, right? You have to create your messages before you build your team, truthfully. What do we want to communicate and how do we communicate it to them? Think about the interventions that you can build for them. So if you're tackling a probation cohort, how do you wish to address them? How do you wish to encourage them? What is the end goal? What are those interventions that you can provide them? And then you begin to build your team. And I swear to you, no one got extra pay. I can say that. We had volunteers and we had faculty, staff members, college assistants. They donated an hour, 2 hours. It wasn't that they were doing this 9 to 5 or they're 20 hours a week. They were saying, I can give 3 hours on Mondays. Awesome, great. And so staff was extremely supportive. So the team can be from what you have, you know, build from what you have. So the most important part is your assessment and your outcomes. And I have to tell you that the assessment is where you learn. Is it working? Are we serving them? How do we adjust this? You saw our workflow change 3 times, but we started to really learn what was working, what was connecting the student. So you need to be flexible. in your approach and understand that ultimately you're serving the students, and your workflow will inform your process. So you'll learn if there is bottlenecking, as our associate provost loves to say. If there's a bottlenecking, if something is slowing things down, then you need to rethink that workflow, or if it's not as effective. And so take stock. You're constantly taking stock of my students' needs, of our program, of our services, how we engage with them. All of this can be done with the resources that you have. Ultimately, it's about student success and connecting that student to what they need, bridging those gaps, building bridges for students, connecting them to what they need. And for you, you'll find that it is quite rewarding work. All right, the next one. Okay. So Alan Hoffner, we're going to praise Alan Hoffner. Alan Hoffner is the director of testing at CSI, and although he could be my grandfather, he's the adopted child of the Center for Advising and his team. We really could not have done this without his team. And at times we were feeling a little beaten, and we would convene and speak to each other because we were truly hearing some tales that were weighing down on our own souls and our minds. And Alan said, regardless of the number of students we help, where we do, it seems to matter a great deal. And students, the feedback from the students and the feedback from the faculty are really the reward in itself. I said it already, I will say it again. This is my proudest moment. This has changed my life in that the human factor, the piece that we often forget was completely revealed for us in the pandemic. And to be able to connect a student to whatever they needed, even if it was just listening, like that lovely student that I will never forget, who lost a child. I just connected for 20 minutes on a phone. I sobbed with her. Veronica was doing the same. EDUCares has grown. What we had birthed here was result of a pandemic and an emergent situation. And what it's given us is a connection to our students and a deeper understanding of what they need. And so EDUCares will be here forever. We are using it for different things. We're still connecting the student, but ultimately it's all about student success. Veronica, you have any other?
I guess yesterday, we had a professor who had some students who had gone non-responsive. And again, we just sent our team members a list of those students, and they made some phone calls, and the professor responded back, thanks so much. I've already gotten some emails. Students promised they're going to get back in the game and submit some work so they can actually persist to the end. So it does work. It does work.
Here are emails. We hope that if you have any questions, or if you'd like to talk a little bit more about best practices or those tough lessons that we learned and how we got over them, we'd be happy to speak with you.
We have some stuff in the chat. So
yes, I'm going to go and see if there's anything in the chat we can answer. So how do you practice boundaries and self-care? Well, that was tough. So burnout happened. Burnout did happen. It was a little sizzle. We didn't fully burn out. But because we ended up building this team, we were able to lean on each other. And so we would actually convene and we would have these conversations. Because we were also in connection with counseling, nice to talk to the director of counseling. And she was also a home for us and offered her services to the EDUCares team during that time if we wanted to chat, because she knew the work that we were doing could be taxing. So there was a support system of other administrative offices for the team because of what we were doing. And there is a question about Navigate and the email accounts. Yes, Navigate will only communicate now with the school email accounts. We do have Retain, and that does still have Preferred. So if we have to, we actually can pull them in. But during that spring semester, thankfully, we were able to connect with them through their Gmail, their Yahoo, their AOL. And if we sent a text message and if there wasn't a cell phone on record, it would then get kicked into an email that was on account. So even if we were trying to do a text, it actually got moved to the next line for us and we were notified of that. Pretty amazing.
Yeah.
We have some time for questions, just a few minutes if anybody has any
Yeah,
questions.
the PowerPoint can be shared. We
Yes.
will definitely share that. I'm going to stop sharing.
Oh, you all write some nice stuff in this chat. Thank you.
Amazing work, student. Thank you so much. I know I'm limited to look. How do you practice boundaries? Presentations.
Yeah, it's the boundary question. Well, I'd like to just say that I am a first-generation college student. I am CSI through and through. I am a representative of the student body, and it had taken me a couple of years, but I am reminded of everything that I struggled with when I was a student. And so this team, this unit it's a part of me. It is truly a part of me and something I'm very proud of. I want to thank you for the praise in there, but we couldn't have done it without the team, without the support of our college, without the support of our provost, our associate provost who's here, always cheering us along. We're the Laverne and Shirley of CSI, and we get it done, and proud of it. Any other questions? I'm seeing just comments.
Yeah, teammate. This is extremely welcome. That's great.
I hope you do this. I hope you attempt it, even on a small scale. Pick a student body that you know you can connect to or need some extra love, and build that bridge. Build that bridge.
Thank you so much for such an incredible presentation.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you.
Do we have any last questions before we wrap up? We have a couple more minutes. I think you've left everyone really satisfied. So everyone, I'm going to drop the website link in here so that you can find your way back to the main room, where we have one more event for the last maybe half hour of the day, starting at 3:30. It should be a good one, so join us. And thank you again to the CSI team. This is really fantastic.
Thank you for choosing us today. Thank you for allowing us to share our stories with you. Thank you.
Thank you.